Hello. You're probably wondering what the service dog laws are in America and how they're different from other countries. I only know the service dog laws in America. I'm not that well versed in any other region. According to the ADA law, service animals are dogs, but I left out that they could also be miniature horses. They can be any breed and any size of dog. You might see a Labrador, you might see a Chihuahua. Either way, any breed is an acceptable breed. They must be trained to perform a task directly related to a person's disability. And emotional support animals are not the same thing as service dogs. You often see that people take their emotional support dogs out in public, put a vest on them, and say that they have public access when in reality they don't. The legal premises change. Service dogs have public access rights while emotional support animals do not. And the reason for this is because service dogs are legally higher on the scale of importance, and the rights that they have are increasingly more than that of an emotional support animal due to the nature of the purpose of service dogs. Service dogs perform tasks for their handlers, which is what we call people who are assigned a service dog. Those people are called service dog handlers. And the dog is there with them and allowed public access 24/7 in any establishment or public place that everyone else is allowed to go, because that dog performs one or more tasks directly related, again, to the person's disability. And I could make a whole separate video on all the kinds of many disabilities that service dogs can perform tasks for. Really popular service dog tasks include medical alert, such as cardiac alert, diabetic alert. You see psychiatric service dogs, which are also not at all emotional support animals. Emotional support animals, their purpose is simply to exist, and the presence of that animal is therapeutic enough for people with ESAs. But people with service dogs actually require the dog to perform activities for this person. So, for example, someone with a psychiatric service dog wouldn't just say that merely the presence of their dog performs a task for them. No, that's not a task, unfortunately. The tasks that psychiatric service dogs perform would be like medication retrieval or interruption of self-harm or panic attack interruption, alerting to a high heart rate prior to a panic attack or PTSD episode or anything of that nature. You also see psychiatric service dogs alerting to schizophrenic outbreaks in their handlers as well. So a bunch of unique different tasks psychiatric service dogs can perform for their owners, their handlers, that emotional support animals are not trained to do, and thus do not have the same rights as a service dog. So with that being said, an establishment can only ask these two questions legally in America if they want to ask. They can ask, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? To that you can answer yes or no, depending on, if it's an ESA, you shouldn't be bringing that in public anyway. And what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? And you don't have to go in full detail. You can just say cardiac alert. You can just say diabetic alert. You can just say medical alert. Okay, it's your medical information, and whether, it's a psychiatric service dog, a medical alert service dog, you can disclose whatever information you want, because it's not legally required that you inform the public or any person, entity, or establishment of the tasks that your dog has been trained to perform for you. Right here we see you are not allowed to request any documentation that the dog is registered, licensed, or certified as a service animal, because in the United States there is no registration, license, or official certification that a service dog is a service dog. In fact, in America, handlers are allowed to train their own service dogs if they are medically and mentally fit to do so, and if they have the ability to train the animal, then they are allowed to train the animal, and that still allows the dog to be a real service dog. The way that you know a service dog is real is, again, are they trained to perform a task directly related to that person's disability? Whether the dog is owner trained or trained by a facility, it is still a real service dog. Okay? Businesses are also not allowed to require that the dog demonstrate its task or inquire about the nature of the person's disability. So a business can't ask you to show an example of how the dog performs its tasks. Down here are some extra information, some more laws. A service dog is required to accompany its handler at all times free of charge in all establishments where the public is allowed, as required by ADA law. This includes but is not limited to public transport, including rideshare services like Uber and Lyft, academic facilities, healthcare facilities, restaurants and stores, hotels and lodging, and airplanes. Under the Fair Housing Act, now we're getting into housing, a service dog is exempt from pet housing fees and no pet policies. Yes, this is true, and this is only applicable to service dogs that have been fully trained. The laws are much different for service dogs in training versus those who have been fully trained. Under the same act, the handler is exempt from showing proof of medical records of disability and proof of the dog's training. Landlords cannot request medical records or proof of the dog's abilities similar to up here. So I live in a place where pets are allowed with a fee, but because my dog would be a service dog, and because my state allows the same rights for service dogs in training as fully trained service dogs, then my dog is exempt under the Fair Housing Act from pet housing fees and no pet policies. So here you go. Here's some information in case you want to, just contact any of these resources. This is the official ADA information line, and this would be their website. Down here would be if you want to contact your particular state's or region's ADA center for any state-centered questions. I don't know if I'm missing anything here. If you ever get into any kind of legal dispute, I would say, like with a business or something, and they don't allow you to enter that establishment, definitely try to work it out as politely as possible. You want to be the most polite person in that establishment if you own a service dog, because everyone's kind of looking at you and wondering, is this a real service dog or what? Is this a real service dog team, or are they just doing it for attention? It's really important that as a service dog team, you draw the least amount of attention possible to you and your dog so that you can successfully integrate into society and, just not cause a ruckus over something so minimal. I know that so many service dog handlers, they really do have psychiatric issues that sort of get in the way of maintaining calm and peace, but if you are able to maintain the peace and calm throughout a peculiar situation or any sort of accusations and wrongful, illegal questions coming from establishments, usually these kinds of scenarios can be solved on their own, but in severe events or blatant discrimination, you can, of course, call the police and request that you have your rights reviewed and you have the establishment go over the rights that are allotted to you and your service dog. It's very important that you do stand up for yourself if you're a service dog handler, because a lot of people don't know anything about service dogs, and that stigma needs to change because there are tons of people who require service dogs, and it's just something to know about. It's something to inform yourself about if you or a loved one require a service dog. Oftentimes, people with service dogs are on multiple medications and treatment plans, and they are not solely relying on a dog for any medical reason, although the dog is considered a medical device or medical equipment under the ADA law, depending on the task that the dog performs. I would say that even though there is no breed restriction for service dogs in America, there are definitely stigmas around like certain types of breeds. I'd say if you struggle with public access or you just have like a ton of anxiety, don't get a pit bull. Okay, don't get a pit bull, don't get a chihuahua. Okay, like don't get none of these breeds that are different from the standard service dog breeds, which are like there's something called the Fab Five, which are the fabulous 5 breeds that are most commonly used for service dog work. And the reason they're called the Fab Five is because, or maybe there's a Fab Four, I don't know the number. The reason they're called that is because they are most commonly used for their intelligence and trainability, even for beginner handlers. And they are often most recognized in public for their demeanor and just their looks. People typically don't question those breeds of dogs, and the breeds of dogs I'm talking about are Labradors, German Shepherds, Golden Retrievers, Poodles, or any type of poodle mix, and I don't know, perhaps I'm forgetting the last one. Collies are also used quite commonly, but if you deviate out of those breeds, it's fine. It's just keep in mind the kind of attention you're going to be attracting in public, and people might question the nature of your dog and to what degree he is a service dog, and you're going to have to defend yourself a lot more if you bring a pit bull into a store claiming that is your service dog than if you brought a Labrador. And that's just how the discrimination works sometimes, especially depending on where you are. That kind of discrimination can be even harder. To be honest, I'm not that big of a fan of pit bulls, but I do acknowledge that some of them may be trained as service animals and successfully help their handlers, and I totally respect that. But that doesn't mean that every service dog team will, or every establishment will respect that. So expect a lot of discrimination and just public access denial. Okay. Is there anything else I wanted to cover? And like I said, if your service dog is a Chihuahua, like, people are going to second guess it. Like, even, like I said, with a pit bull, it's just about the breed stigmatization. Do you want to make it harder for yourself, or do you just want to blend in? Do you want to fit in? Because guess what? Fitting in is not a bad thing, especially when it comes to service dogs. Like I said, you want to attract the least amount of attention possible to you and remain as professional as possible. So, yes, another thing that I wanted to address is this piece right here, which I forgot is very important. There are identification cards online and fake licenses and certifications which you can purchase for a certain amount on platforms like Amazon, or they'll call themselves like U.S. Service Dog Registry or anything sort of professional in nature like that. Do you understand that just because these companies exist online and that they offer these kinds of documentations and registrations and licenses doesn't mean that they are official by any means? Because like I said, the official United States law is that there is no registration, there is no licensure, there is no certification to prove that a service dog is a real service dog. Other than this is truly the sole criteria of your dog. This is what really matters and what counts, okay? And so businesses are not allowed to ask for any ID or certification that includes anything from those websites that you could purchase a dog ID from. It's definitely not like illegal to purchase those kind of registrations or IDs. It's just not required. And so by purchasing them, you are feeding into the lie that documentation is required, and it's low-key making it harder for other service dog handlers to exist and pass by the world in these establishments that will ultimately ask, does your dog have an ID? Does your dog have a license? Do you have a certification? Where's the paperwork for the dog? Which these are all illegal questions, by the way, but companies ask them all the time. Do not be surprised. I would recommend carrying a business card instead, stating these laws in short. It really helps. Okay, so as I was looking back at that video and watching, I noticed that I left out a really important detail. So along with there being no official documentation, license, or registration or certification for service dogs in America, there's also no requirement to have them vested in public or noticeably having any service dog material on them. The most popular thing would be using a vest, harness, or collar that states in big bold letters service dog on them. Some people get these customized on places like Etsy, Amazon, but it's not required. You don't require a sort of identification for your service dog. You don't need a vest. You don't need a collar. This law changes depending on what state you're in, because, and not for service dogs that are fully trained. The law only changes for service dogs who are in training. And when a service dog is in training, you are required by law to make that known to the public and place some kind of marker or form of identification on the dog, like it could be something as simple as a leash wrap that states service dog in training, or just in training. Those two simple words on a leash wrap or collar or harness are enough. And then when the dog is fully trained, then they no longer require any form of identification after that. So that's a very important thing to note. Like I said, in my state, my state allows the same rights for service dogs in training as those who are fully trained. However, my state also is one of the states that requires service dogs who are in training to be labeled as such, so that there is no misconception about, oh, this person is just bringing a puppy into the store for no reason, so I can bring my dog in too. No, it's not like that. So that's why you gotta label service dogs who are in training, so that there is no confusion. You can also, label your adult fully trained service dog so that there is also no confusion. But again, do not be surprised should there be any confusion regardless, because seeing a dog in public is kind of like seeing a unicorn in America, especially when they're in stores and malls and things like that. If you have any more service dog questions or comments or concerns, or if you want to correct me on something, or if you have any particular questions for your state in service dogs in training and fully trained service dogs, what the laws are in your state, I can totally do videos on that, or just reply in the comments, whatever is preferred. And on top of that, another thing I wanted to say is, even though registration is not a thing, like it's not required, it's not legal to provide, to make things a lot easier, you can, of course, purchase these things just to have them, just to have records, training logs. If you're a handler who's owner training your own service dog, it's really important that you document every bit of training, whether that's through videos or like a physical document and paper, or just like a Google Doc that you sort of log in every single task that you train the dog for. directly related to your disability, then that is really going to help. Also, another misconception is that you must present a doctor's note to your landlord so that you may be exempt from pet housing fees and all that. You don't do that. That's not required. That's strictly your medical information between you and your doctor. Your landlord cannot legally request that information of you, and neither can any establishment like a Walmart or any other place that you would go to shop. Now, it might be a little bit tricky for air travel as the laws are constantly changing. Flight laws have always been tricky, but and they just seem to keep getting trickier. So do stay up to date on those flight laws. For the most part, I would say for flying, bring whatever documentation you can. Vet records, they 100% will they 100% will request that from you. That's just for everyone. It's not just a discriminatory thing like, oh, they're asking me for vet records for my service dog? That's ridiculous. That's discrimination. No, it's not. It's not discrimination. Vet records are for the health and safety of every single passenger, including the other animals on board who may be present. So, yeah, definitely bring whatever paperwork you can if you're going to be flying with your dog. And again, just remain peaceful, remain calm. Not everything is an attack. Not everything is an interrogation. Just, present yourself calmly and with the intent to listen and educate promptly and politely so that there may be no dispute. I am not an advocate for people who actively attack other people who come after them and their dog. A lot of people are just misinformed. A lot of people are not even informed enough to be misinformed. That's how bad it is. That's how bad the lack of knowledge is in the service dog department. So I would highly just not recommend attacking people for approaching you or your dog unless those people are very blatantly harassing you or assaulting you or your dog. Then I would say that some action would be required, and you should call the police if that is the case, because it's very important to stand up for yourself, like I said, yourself and your dog, because no one else will. And sometimes the lack of information is so bad that you'll find yourself having to educate the police that are in your area, because when they are called to a scene like that, a lot of them don't know. They don't know. They don't know the laws. It's more likely that you know the service dog laws even more than the local police do in your area. So be prepared for that. And like I said, carry a business card. It's really important. It would help a lot. So you don't have to memorize all this stuff. They don't have to memorize all this stuff. They have it in writing. And on that business card, I would highly recommend that you include at least this source right here. So, especially if you don't have enough space on the card, just include this stuff, the number. Tell the people to call the number and ask the questions that they have if they don't believe you as a trusted, credible source, because a lot of the times they won't believe you alone. So yeah, I could probably do another video on the tips for service dog handlers and owners and such. It's not my first time owning a service dog and training one. I've had one in the past, so that I owner trained myself. Anyway, yeah, let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Again, thanks for watching.